Carol Dawson tells us a little bit about Dennis Lindsey. I've got a new favorite general manager in the NBA. His name's not Dennis Lindsey. He's not really my favorite, just something he said. A research project I'm working on. Some questions from you involving DeMarre Carroll, Kevin Murphy, and others. What do we think of Nicholas Batum? The Blazers have a new head man. And one other note. Oh, PGA Tour. I don't know if I'll get to that. It's all coming up on today's edition of Tip Off! International basketball yesterday was as good as it gets. In fact, I would argue it was better than March Madness. I know that's sacrilegious, but it was way better. It was good. Good basketball. Huge emotion. Single elimination. That was a bad thing. Sorry. It's always bad. It's always like I wonder, like, I do those stupid things, and that's become kind of a joke amongst us. I get it. Like, and I actually think this guy had a good point. The guy, it's to this point, somebody sent me something the other day that was like, hey, could you do more written posts on Locked on Jazz? Because I've kind of gotten away from that recently. And the answer is absolutely, my bad. But then I thought about it for a while. I was like, why? Like, I'm guessing that he and his buddies get together and make fun of all of my spelling errors and grammatical errors, and they don't have anything to make fun of right now because my grammar and spelling and mistakes I make are so horrendous that I can't imagine why anyone misses those things. It's kind of like someone says, where was the drum roll? Anyway, new podcast went up yesterday. Carol Dawson, who worked with Dennis Lindsey for 11 years, and I chatted for about 10, 15 minutes. I actually just started the recorder. He's just a talker, so like we had kind of started, and I hadn't hit record yet, so it just jumps in. He's talking about Yao Ming and some stuff like that. It's a good story. So make sure you catch that. What jumped out to me at one point was that, you know, for all these other things about Lindsay, you're kind of wondering what his personality is, and at one point he goes, well, he's certainly not a yes man. So this guy comes, even in this organization that's pretty imposing and pretty daunting and pretty much has the one way that they do things, or seemingly, he seems to arrive to the Jazz with at least some pretty strong opinions and is making a signature for his career, so I'd be surprised if he's quiet, and I'd be surprised if he's unimpactful. The other one is very clear. He is a high-end analytics guy. He may not be Daryl Morey, but he's worked under him. He's seen what the Spurs do are very high-end analytics. So that should be a pretty large change to who we are and how we do things. And it's worth taking a look at. So make sure you check that out. I hope you guys are enjoying the heat. Boy, it was hot yesterday. But hopefully it'll cool down a little bit. It's impacting Utah and BYU probably in a positive way as they get their spring practices or their fall practices going on. By the way, I will be touching on Utah and BYU a little. It's not really my strength anymore. PK and covers it better probably than I do at this point. But Ian Furness and I will bring back two guys on the 12 podcast for those who are wondering, as much because Ian and I are good friends and we like to do it. I will always be Jazz first, NBA second, Utah sports third, and then anything kind of general after that. So when there's issues that are worth some discussion, I'll bring them up. If I think so. I mean, but it's not going to be that daily. Elisa looks good compared to this running back and that running back. And I think, my only suggestion I would tell you that as a media member who had the grind of day-to-day coverage of Utah and BYU, you get lost about 2 days, 3 days after the first scrimmage. You'll start to get lost inside of what the real stories are. In other words, at Utah, the story really, with almost no variation, is twofold on what's going on. One, the replacement of the bookends on the offensive line of Cullen and Bergstrom. There's really no other issue that matters. in camp for Utah. If they cannot get solid and tackle play on that offensive line, particularly as they go back with Brian Johnson as the offense coordinator and go back to that kind of spread stuff, that they're in a world of hurt. A world of hurt. The second one, obviously, but I think it's related, is Jordan Wynn. And I do think it's a weird mix with the idea that they're going back to the Brian Johnson spread and what they do with Jordan Wynn as the quarterback, because that doesn't match to who he is. And so in many ways, it's clear we're kind of in this transition of until the other guys are ready. Chase Hanson's obviously redshirting, but with the case of Travis. Those are the two issues that really, really matter. And I'm not sure what other ones matter. What's interesting at BYU is it's not as abundantly clear to me what those issues are. I think the one thing you have is Brandon Doman with control of what the offense is going into his second year as offensive coordinator, and I would suspect that things just run much more fluidly with BYU's in that regard. But BYU always has the issue of like, well, is their secondary going to be good enough? And I think, and is the defense, and I feel like the Broncos defense has been year in and year out pretty consistent. They play that same style depending on who the type of the opponent is. They play, they avoid one-on-one matchups in those areas the best they possibly can, and that's kind of who they are. So I don't, there's some pieces there that I think have some question marks on them, but I don't feel like that's a huge issue with them. So, obviously running back depth is a big one, but I thought, frankly, Utah last year proved that, John White carried a huge load, crazy huge load. Running back depth can be overrated, and with Riley Nelson in the back, that's really another running back for them. And, I think the backup quarterback position at BYU with Lark is completely unworrisome. I mean, those guys, even with Jake leaving, those other guys were all good and had been around for a while. So anyway, that wasn't what I was planning to talk about today, but I just thought I'd drop a note or two. Excited for football. So make sure you listen to the Carroll Dawson Carroll Dawson podcast. My new favorite GM, he's not really my favorite, but I loved this. The Cavaliers sign CJ Miles, and Chris Grant, their GM, says CJ brings solid NBA experience to the team, yet he is still entering his prime at 25. His ability to play multiple positions adds depth and flexibility to our roster. That's accurate. And really, for the Cavaliers, it might not be a bad signing, considering they have Anthony Parker, Jamaro Moon, and Alonzo Gee as the other guys who played that position last year. And there's a chance CJ's better than all those guys. We'd probably, chance he might not be, but I think there's a chance he's better than those guys. And so it's probably a good signing. But what I love is so often when these signings are made, it's this kind of garbage of who they are. And Chris Grant's like totally honest. Like, okay, he's played a lot. He's athletic enough to play multiple positions. But no, I don't really expect the world coming out of him. And I kind of admire that. I will tell you, it's really interesting to me of what's going on with a guy like CJ, because I was talking to someone the other day about CJ, and basically I'm telling them statistically, here's what it says, and this and that, but there's always this little flicker in the back of your mind with CJ that, gosh, it might, he's pretty, maybe, and I can see why he will continue to get jobs for a while, and why the Jazz held on to him for 6 or 7 years, because there is this little thought in the back of your head that just maybe that skill level comes together. And then you back yourself up and you say, but the jump shot's fundamentally wrong, and there's a bunch of other things you look at, and when it gets right down to it, no, it's probably not true. And I actually just looked at the numbers right now, and according, for example, on the Locke offensive rating, CJ last year was a minus 4.7, and if you actually compare that to the guys that he's supposed to be replacing. Anthony Parker was a plus 4.1. Alonzo Gee was a plus 3.4. Omri Caspi was a minus 0.1. So actually, I'm not sure they did get any better. Oh well. I'm actually working on a research project right now. It's becoming cumbersome, and I'm not sure I'm good enough to totally figure out what I'm doing with it. But the whole idea of whether players change when they change systems and change teammates. And as I've said numerous times here, I fundamentally don't believe it's true. And we have 3 major guys doing it, so I'd like to try to look at it a little bit. And I've run some spreadsheets where I've taken every player in the NBA over the last 3 years and then alphabetized them and then tried to figure out which ones have switched teams and then tried to categorize them into whether their role changed or they played a similar role, and then tried to figure out whether their play changed. But I must tell you, it's hard to kind of define, like, what am I really defining and what are the metrics and standard deviation, some of that stuff that's more complicated than I'm capable of. A few other notes involving the Jazz. It's pretty clear what's going on with Raja Bell. He can't get a job. And so he doesn't want to take a buyout from the Jazz now because he doesn't want to lose that money if, in fact, he's not going to get a job in the NBA this year. And everyone kind of knows that one of his knees needs microfracture surgery, or the possibility of it. So that's what's happened there. And I don't know how it's going to. I don't see Raj in a Jazz uniform again. But I also I'm not sure I see this ending. If he's suddenly totally not willing to send a buyout, I think the Jazz may have missed their window on how to amnesty him. But frankly, I'm not sure it will really matter. In regards to Josh Howard, I don't see him on the Jazz roster. I've said this, and I understand. The only scenario here, which might be, is that Josh does not get a guaranteed deal. And so now the Jazz have a chance to bring Josh Howard into camp on a non-guaranteed deal where if he doesn't make but he was not good last year. He shot 39% from the field and 24% from 3, and, came out to me as our worst on my Locke offensive rankings, came out as our worst offensive player last year, even behind Earl Watson. So I'm not sure why you still want to do that, but that's, I think, what's going on there is we might as well just keep our name in the hat. But I suspect we have no spot for him or interest in him, but you're just being polite. You're not going to publicly take your name out of it. It doesn't hurt to have your name in it. And a lot of that, realize where that information's all coming from. It's coming from his agent, but Josh can't obviously doesn't quite have a job yet either. Question from Daniel Tate on Twitter. What's going on with Kevin Murphy? Will he just have to bust his butt at camp and impress the coaches enough to make the roster? And the answer is yes. That's exactly what he has to do. He's a second-round draft pick. They like him. They hope he makes the roster. But yeah, he's got to really play. I mean, if he comes in out of shape or doesn't show some commitment or some things of that nature or suddenly just looks overwhelmed in an NBA camp, see ya. And not a big deal because he's a second-round pick. We've done it before. Goran Sutan or whoever else. Just because, we've done this before. I think only about 13% of the second-round draft picks ever make it. Are the Jazz re-signing DeMarre Carroll? Came in from Nick Tolan 5. I think DeMarre will be on the roster, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see what role he plays. Because it's becoming a full position. But DeMarre bring to the comment that Dennis Lindsay made the other day about certain guys, you got to have guys that add a little piece and do something a little different. And DeMarre Carroll does that for the Jazz. He brings a little bit more length. He brings a little bit more defensive play. He does things in a little bit of a different fashion than the other guys on the roster. And so he's a nice roster piece. He plays the game very differently than, say, an Alec Burks or even a Randy Foye, and he plays the game who are undersized. He plays the game differently than any of the small forwards on the roster. So I think it's a good fit for the Jazz, and obviously with him doing junior Jazz, the Jazz are certainly expecting to have him back on the roster. He sent out some neat pictures, and if you follow him on Twitter, he sent out some neat pictures working with Junior Jazz right now. What's your guys' thought of what Nicholas Batum did yesterday? Part of me, I don't know exactly what I think on this. So on one level, I really find Nicholas Batum, if you don't know, he got upset. I mean, the International Basketball show was amazing. Russia versus Lithuania was loaded with emotion. Spain versus France was seriously loaded with emotion. Then Argentina, Brazil, afterwards, Argentina acted like they'd won it, but that's a big South American battle. So in the France-Spain game, France felt as though Spain intentionally lost the last game of pool play to play France because they thought they could beat them. You have all the bordering European country battle going on there. And they're going to lose, and Batum's got to commit an automatic foul, and he just rears off and hits the guy right in the balls. And it was nasty, awful. It was terrible. And so does that change your opinion of a guy for ever? I mean, what's your thought on that? Because part of me says to myself, wow, that's terrible. Like most of yesterday, my thought kind of was, wow, I have a totally different opinion of DeMarre Carroll today, of Nicholas Batum today, than I ever did prior. Then this morning, for whatever reason, I woke up and thought to myself, okay, so an athlete lost it in competition. Like, haven't we all done that? I mean, whether it's like ward ball or whatever else, haven't we all at some point in time lost it in competition? I mean, when I was a high school pitcher, I threw at a guy's head. I thought I just totally I was getting beat, and I was kind of pissed, and I was losing it, and I threw at a guy's head. I don't know. So I can't really figure out what I think about it. Give me you're welcome to share with that. Blazers hired a really good guy in Terry Stotts, who I know well. He actually spent summer. He and his wife lived in Deer Valley for a summer, Park City for a summer, over by the Jordanelle. Actually, pretty cool. He and his wife have, on years past, they don't have kids, so every summer they go live in a different place in America. Bend, Oregon, Deer Valley, Jackson, wherever they want, just to experience it, which is kind of a cool way to do things in a transient NBA life. All right, PGA Championship, I'm excited to watch it. This golf course is supposed to be fabulous. In regards to Tiger, I mean, he's the best player on the tour. He's most likely to win. The separation between he and everyone else is very small. So if he has anything wrong with his game, he doesn't win anymore. And that's really where he is as a golfer today. He will win more majors, but he won't win 5 more, I don't think. 5 more is a Hall of Fame career, as I heard on DJ and PK were talking about this the other day on 1280 The Zone. He's not dramatically better than everyone else, but he is winning more regular tournaments than anyone in the tour, so he's more likely to win one of these as well. And that was me turning on the PGA Championship to see if it's on yet, in which case I'm now going to go watch it. You have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow. I need someone to help me with I forget my stories. I got to tell a story about Strava holes. Strava holes? You know what it is. You're laughing right now if you're a biker. See ya.